All right. So welcome everybody. Once upon a time, telling more memorable stories. It's good to have you all here. Um, Go ahead and if you haven't already, introduce yourself in the chat and just want to encourage you to use the chat box throughout for questions. And while you're here, I want to go ahead and drop into the chat the evaluation form. If you would please take a minute to open that up so it's open after the session's over and give us some feedback on today's session. That would be wonderful. Go ahead and so let me introduce myself and introduce River Network. So my name is Diana Toledo. I am Senior River Program Director here at River Network, based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And I am joined by my colleague, Stephanie. You want to introduce yourself, Stephanie?
Sure. Hi, all. I'm Stephanie Heibretter. I'm the Director of Urban and Community Forestry here at River Network.
All right. And it's good to have Stephanie, who just returned last week from parental leave. So welcome back, Stephanie. If you're new to River Network, we are a national organization. Our goal is to grow and strengthen the national network of folks who are on the ground doing water, justice, river work, and climate work, I would add, including around urban and community forestry. This session today is funded and supported by USDA Urban and Community Forestry. So I want to give a shout out to them, and it's great to see a number of our grantees through that program joining us here. Please, we encourage you to take a look at the website and look at the map of network members that we have around the country, almost 1,000 strong at this point. And our goal is to bring you sessions such as today's so you can do your own work more effectively. So welcome to River Network. And so today I want to just super excited to welcome Bold Bison. Today's session is one of really a three-part session for the broader River Network around topics of communication. So we're launching here in November. We'll have one in December and one in January. So just want to encourage you to start thinking ahead. I'll provide some registration information for the upcoming sessions here as we wrap up. So super excited to have Brandon and Natalie join. Brandon Hayes, founder and principal of Bold Bison, and Natalie Citro, project manager there. They're in top-notch communications shop, really focusing on organizations that are doing conservation and food justice work. They can introduce their own organization. But longtime partner of River Network, excellent resource for all the groups in our network, and our presenters for today. So with that, let me turn it over to both of you. Brandon, Natalie, welcome.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here today. And while I pull together my slides, I just want to say that we hope to have a lot of fun today. And because storytelling can be really, really fun. It's important for communications. It's important to have that skill and sort of think about how we use stories sort of all the time. So what we're going to do today is to practice some storytelling in sort of different contexts and use a couple of different tools to think about what makes a good story. So we hope to have a really good time over the next not quite 90 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. There we go. Okay. So welcome to Once Upon a Time, telling more memorable stories. And as Diana mentioned, Bold Bison, we are a communications firm. We focus on conservation organizations, local food and regenerative ag organizations, environmental nonprofits across the entire country. That's the sector we work in. We love doing a lot of sort of communications thinking and social media and websites and all that kind of good stuff. And we love having workshops. We love telling stories. And this is one of my very favorite workshops that we do. So really excited to be presenting it to all of you today. To get the most from this workshop, okay, it is 2:30 in the afternoon here in Chicago, where I am. And if you were hoping like, okay, I'm going to listen in and I'm going to do 14 other things to get stuff off my plate this afternoon, this is probably not the best workshop for you. This is truly a workshop and not a webinar. So we do invite you to reduce those distractions. We know how hard that can be when we are in a digital space, but this is going to be a highly, highly interactive workshop. No one will be forced to tell a story to the full group who does not want to. I want to make that very, very clear. This isn't a put people on the spot sort of thing. We will invite you to share stories with others, either in pairs or in groups of only as large as 3. So know that this is a very interactive workshop, and it really kind of only works if you're willing to kind of jump in and kind of be part of it and participate. Please feel free to take notes and ask questions. Diana, Stephanie, Natalie, and I, but particularly the other 3, will be kind of watching the chat, sort of surfacing things and helping me as I'm facilitating conversation, sort of make sure that we're catching folks who have questions. Please feel free to use the raise hand function in Zoom, or put something in the chat. Would love to get some conversations going, both with microphones spoken into the room, and then also sort of in chat on the side. And I invite you to listen actively to the experiences of fellow participants. We will be asking, again, you to tell stories, but also for you to hear stories that others are being told, that others are telling you today. So that sort of reminder to listen actively. And then we invite you to center yourself and be present, whether or not you're in a place that received snow. It's November, the days are getting shorter. Let's sort of get our afternoon tea, get our afternoon cup of coffee, whatever is your vibe, and be together for the next little bit of time. Okay. Want to open up the conversation with a group conversation. Would definitely encourage folks who have thoughts, please go ahead and turn on your mic, and share your thought. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen once I sort of introduce the topic, because Natalie's going to start recording some of your answers. And you can use the chat, but would love to have some other voices at this point. But thinking about some of your favorite stories, what makes for a memorable story? What are elements of a story that makes it memorable? So think about that for a second. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and sort of open it up so we can see faces. And Natalie's going to begin to scribe. I'm just curious, what is an element that makes a story memorable? What are your thoughts?
I'll kick it off. I think there's some emotion tied to it. I think, whether that's fear or laughter or love or excitement, there's a link to a big emotion.
Excellent. I love that. So emotion and sort of that whole range that you had there, sort of those sort of fundamental human emotions. So fear, something can have tension, laughter, something that's funny. And I really want to emphasize that, humor as a tool when it comes to storytelling to make something memorable, love, excitement, all those kinds of things. So that sort of emotional center to the story. Love it. What else? What else makes a good story or memorable story? In the chat, we have a challenge or problem. Even better if it's relatable. So some sort of thing that needs to be addressed, some sort of reason for the story to be, something for someone to do, and to make it relatable. So those are 2 things that I think are great. What are some other elements of a memorable story?
Someone in the chat said strong characters, and I would add to that intriguing characters.
Excellent. What do you see as the difference there between intriguing and strong? How do you unpack that?
There's definitely overlap, but I feel like, to me, strong means like a personality like that's deep and sophisticated enough that it seems like an actual person, like it's not just shallow. And then intriguing, like, I don't know, it pulls me in if there's something that you wonder about the character. So they're kind of lifelike, but also like interesting and maybe a little mysterious.
I love that. And so I like to use that you wonder about, that sort of invitation to curiosity, that invitation to wanting to know more about that. That's fantastic. What else makes a memorable story? There's some other elements.
Along the same lines, I'm thinking like an oddity or weirdness factor, like something that's out of the norm, like whether it's like the setting, like the location, or a weird animal that's a part of the story, something that's not normal in everybody's everyday life.
Got that. That sort of surprising factor, something that's like, oh, what is this? I want to know more about that. So still that sort of kind of that invitation to sort of something that's unusual that you want to know more about. I love that. Other things that make stories memorable. Yeah, Tim.
I'm having a hard time putting this straightforward. It's related to relatable. Like there are broader implications to something beyond the story. Like you can connect it to something greater than the story itself. Like, oh my gosh, the story reminds me of this other thing, and it's so much bigger than just this.
Right. So sort of a story that can shine a light on an issue that's bigger or something that's bigger. That sort of great tradition of allegory, where we're sort of very sort of archetypal, story like myth, where that sort of where figures will be a way to understand a process or something that's larger than can be understood. So think about Greek myth and the idea of the sun being a chariot that's driven by Apollo across the sky, and then sort of how did that happen? How did that circumstance take place as a way of describing something bigger? So as one example of that idea of connecting a story to something that's sort of bigger implications. Love it. Love it. This is a great list. This is a different list than we often get when we do this workshop, and a much more sophisticated list. I'm really digging this. So what are some other memorable elements of stories?
I think a story that's easy to follow makes it memorable. You can have really complex plot lines, through lines, or whatever, but if you can't remember details, it tends to not be, something that sticks to your memory. So there has to be like a clear through line that is easy to follow and understand.
Exactly. So like that difference between a fairy tale, that we've heard many times, that's relatively straightforward and and simplistic in terms of its plot points, versus War and Peace or something like that that has a huge sort of complicated, plot structure and that type of thing. So thinking about that invitation to simplicity as being tantamount to an invitation to being memorable, particularly as we're trying to talk about the stories of the work that we do. I think that's really important to lift up. Anything else? Anything else in terms of what makes a memorable story?
Maybe something that's impactful or leaves you like feeling really good at the end, those feel-good stories.
Sure. Something that's sort of life affirming, that brings joy. It might even have, a call to action or something that you can do at the end, some sort of way for you to participate too as a piece of it. I think that's really important. I think also making sure that the story has a plot. And I want to sort of underscore that a little bit, because there's sort of a difference between an anecdote, sort of here's a funny thing that happened, and sort of thinking about that sort of arc of a story. So sort of keeping that in mind too, thinking about what makes a story. And we'll dig into that a little bit more in sort of the back half of today's session. Other things that make stories memorable. Let's take a few more. I will offer out detail, so sort of specificity of place, specificity of setting the character, setting the action in some place that's either fantastical or real, but that has detail to it. So thinking about how to incorporate sort of senses into it, thinking about sights and smells, things like that. In the chat, seeing a force, a character, other element that aids the protagonist in solving the problem. So thinking about sort of that interaction between, the protagonist and maybe, the obvious example, and it's an example that I often go back to in this workshop, is Cinderella, the fairy godmother coming and helping Cinderella get to the ball and that type of thing. So sort of that figure that comes in and helps. Anything else?
along the lines of being impactful, in addition to like leaving you with a feel good feeling, maybe a lesson or something that you can like, a moral or something you can like take away from the story and implement in your own life or something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really want to underscore that. So thinking about the reason that you were told the story, sort of the why of the story, the sort of what is the thing that you can take from the story, because that really ties back to stories. And we're going to get there by the end of the workshop, that are stories about the work that you do, about the movement that you're in, about, what happens on the ground, because those are often then those points where you can have that call to action, to volunteer for your organization, to donate to your organization, to participate, to advocate, to reach out to elected officials on behalf of a movement or an issue or that type of thing. So having that kind of clear sort of understanding of the why, and then that next step, sort of the moral, the resolution, that type of thing. So making sure that we land that in our stories. Okay, great list. We'll return to the list, and we can pop it up and share it a few more times. But what I want to do now is I want to stop talking, and I want to invite you all to do your first round of storytelling with each other. And everyone's like, well, here we go. Here's the moment. And what we're going to invite you to do is we're going to invite you to select a prompt. Natalie's going to put a link to the breakout room instructions in the chat. And Natalie, if you could also copy paste the prompts in the chat, that would be great too. So we're giving you some prompts, and the prompts are all inviting you to tell a story about something, that has happened to you personally. So you don't have to think about, what relates to this or work or that type of thing, or organization or mission. Where we want to begin today is thinking about a prompt, a story prompt that has to do with something that's happened in your life. We're going to pair you off. So we're going to create breakout rooms. Now he's going to pull them together, pairs in the breakout rooms. If we have to, we might do a trio here and there. And we'd like you to take turns sharing that personal story with each other. So you're going to go into your breakout room, introduce yourselves to each other, and then choose who wants to go first, and select a prompt from the list, and then go ahead and share a story. If you want to share a story from a prompt that isn't on the list, that's fine too. We just offer that as ideas. But try to keep your story to about 90 seconds or 2 minutes. So this idea of going in, being able to think about it, being able to introduce yourselves to your partner, and then take about 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and to take the first person's turn, then the second person's turn, because we're going to bring you back in about 8 minutes after we put you into the room. So don't want you to dwell on it too much, but go ahead and begin to think about a story that you might want to share. And Natalie, how are we doing with breakout rooms? Great.
We're ready to go.
And I'm going to go ahead and drop the prompts also in the chat here so folks can see them. So they're also going to be in that link. And Renee, I see that you're not going to be able to participate for a few minutes. That's just fine. That's fine. We'll pull you into a group as soon as you're able to participate again. But again, sort of thing, a story about a pet, cooking, something from high school, for example, a family vacation, a memorable musical performance or concert. So sort of low-hanging fruit. But this idea of thinking about and sharing a story with your partner. Any questions about what we're asking you to do? Okay. Go ahead if you haven't yet, click the link to the breakouts that was in the chat so that you have the instructions and you have the prompts when you're in your rooms. And if we're ready, we will open up the rooms and we'll see you back here in about 8 minutes. And the breakout rooms are open.
Shoot, I guess I can't be in a room because I'm a host. Is that right? Can I just join?
That
whenever?
might be. Let me see if I can.
I can join room 3. Rachel seems to be alone.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Stephanie, do you want to participate in the room?
Unfortunately, I'm having to pump real quick during,
Sure.
so I can participate in the next one though, for sure.
Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Just waiting for a few more folks. Okay, I think everyone is back. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm looking for a volunteer to share with the group the story that you heard from the other person. Who would like to share the story that you heard from your story partner? Emma, excellent. Thank you for volunteering.
Hello, friends. Let me make sure that I get this gentleman's name correct. Oh no. Well, the gentleman that I spoke to hiked the AT, which I think is so sick, the Appalachian Trail. And when he returned, his girlfriend literally did not recognize him, like was looking in a crowd, like searching for him. And he's standing there looking at her, and she cannot recognize him because he is so like physically changed, which I think is just really remarkable.
Right. Is he still on the call?
Yes, I think he turned his camera off, which is oh, there you are. It's Eli.
Oh, Eli. Hi, Eli. Excellent.
Hello.
Eli, how did Emma do?
She did great. I mean, those were the big points. Yeah. I got to go on a long walk in the woods and it was amazing. And it changed my mentality and my body drastically. And yeah, by the time I got back, my girlfriend at the time didn't even recognize me standing in a crowd. She thought I was just some horrible looking guy smiling at her real big.
Excellent. Excellent. Emma, for you, what was memorable? Why did you want to share Eli's story with us?
I mean, personally, I think that anyone who has ever hiked the AT is like automatically assumed a badass. And so like that's definitely a relatable thing to me. That's been, I mean, a dream of mine for a very long time. But also just I think the I don't know, the imagery of being changed as much physically as you are like spiritually by such a journey is very impactful. To the point that like a loved one could not recognize you. I think there's so much there, humor, like this deep emotion. But again, I mean, overall, the moment that he said I hiked the AT, I was like, oh man, that's just amazing. So.
Excellent. So I'm hearing some of the things I'm hearing is definitely connection with audience. So you got a lot out of it. Definitely the twist of the girlfriend not being able to recognize, and then also the way Eli, even when you were sharing a little bit with us too, getting a laugh, that sort of there's depth, but there's also humor there. So some of that humor in the emotion. I also really liked Emma, I think you captured it well when you were sharing the story with us. sort of setting the stage of this moment of, you know, getting off the trail and sort of with the crowd. Like you can picture the crowd, you can picture the girlfriend scanning, like you can picture that moment in a really good way. So it's also something where there was some sort of a memorable kind of staging to kind of what was happening. You conjured up the visuals there really well. So thank you both. Could I get another volunteer to share the story that you heard? This is the facilitator's technique called wait until somebody says something.
I can share.
Thank you.
I talked with Amber, and she told me about the time she's a big runner, and she was running along the road, and it was getting a little icy out, so relatable to the time of year right now. And she started running on the grass to try and avoid, I think she said to try and avoid like the icy road, and she slipped and fell and she broke her wrist. Yeah, and I asked her if she knew right away, and she was like, yeah, pretty much as soon as the shock like wore off, she was walking and shaking and like holding her wrist. But her boyfriend came to get her. They went to the emergency room, but they had plans that day and they all got canceled because they had to go to the emergency room. So that was her story.
Thank you. Amber, how did she do?
Hi everyone. She did pretty well. The plans we had was to go to like the AFC football championship though, so my boyfriend at the time was pretty upset. But yeah, that's all right. But she did pretty well. Got all high points.
Excellent. Rhiannon, what did you find memorable? Why did you want to share Amber's story?
Well, I just think I've never broken a bone, so I always think it's interesting to hear, well, not good, but like interesting to hear how it happens, because you can fall a million times and not break a bone, and then you can fall and break your wrist, and it's obviously upsetting. And she was telling me that like afterwards it was tough, like she was recognizing that how hard it was to cook or like blow her hair, like blow dry her hair and stuff. So I don't know. I just found the details like that. Like I followed up and was asking questions, was interested in it. So
Nice. So again, interest from the audience, which can be unexpected. I mean, we're putting you in random pairs, so that's really great. And that detail too, I think was really nice. And I also like you lifted it up when you were sharing the story with us, this idea that it's sort of relatable to this time of year. I mean, I can literally look out my window and see patches of ice and snow and that type of thing. So that adds to sort of the tactile kind of sense of the time that we're in versus a story that happened in May or happened in June for this time of year. Great. Okay. I want to introduce a tool to all of you, and it is called, there we go. It is called the Story Spine. So the Story Spine, it was developed by a playwright named Ken Adams. And it is a way to think about stories without being sort of, mucked up or tripping over the sort of the literary criticism and theory kind of thing, like that you would have learned in high school and that sort of thing. It's a way of creating a series of prompts for a story to help you sort of think about the arc and the shape, the narrative structure of that story. So the way that it works is there are 5 sort of elements. So the platform, the catalyst, the consequences, the climax, and the resolution, sort of the 5 sort of stages that the story goes through. And it offers these prompts for you. So this idea of, starting with that, what is the platform? What is the foundation? What is the sort of status quo as the story begins? So this idea of, once upon a time being kind of the classic one. Every day, this thing happens. So thinking about one of the stories that we heard, it could be Amber's story saying, every day I go out for a run, and that type of thing, sort of establishing the sort of present tense of the story. And then moving into the catalyst. But one day it was icy. I'm not going to totally use Amber's example because I'm ask her to do it in a few minutes. But that idea of there's sort of the regular sort of present tense of what's happening, and then this prompt, but one day something else happened, but one day someone showed up, but one day something different came in and sort of set the action on its course. Because of that thing that happened, because of that ice on the road, however you want to think about it, this next thing happened. And you see that that can be repeated as many times as you wish. So because of that, let's use Cinderella. Cinderella, I already raised it earlier with the fairy godmother. So once upon a time, young girl lived with her wicked stepmother and 2 wicked stepsisters. Every day she had to clean and cook and do all the chores in the household. But one day, the king announced that he was going to hold a ball so that his son could find a wife. Because of that, Cinderella asked if she could go to the ball. Because of that, the wicked stepmother said, "No, you may not go to the ball." Because of that, the fairy godmother stepped in and created the dress and blah, 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 until finally Cinderella was able to attend the ball, in her pumpkin turned into a carriage. At the ball, because of that, because she went to the ball, she met the prince. Because of that, they fell in love, and so on and so forth. And then moving through the story until it reaches that resolution. And ever since then, or the moral of the story is, you see there that I was even making a choice. The climax of Cinderella in the way that I was telling it could be that she finally got to go to the ball. Sort of this dream realized she gets to go to the ball. But then I had to go back to the consequences. I had to go back to because of that to move us on to the next sort of climax in the story, which is, midnight and the glass slipper and finding the glass slipper. You could also tell the story from a completely different direction. You could tell it from sort of the prince's side, that once upon a time he lived in a castle, he was bored, he didn't want to marry anyone. One day his father, said he was going to do this and blah, blah, blah. He met this beautiful girl and on and on and on. I use Cinderella because it has that flexibility of trying to figure out exactly where you want to put the climax, or if there needs to be more than one climax, and sort of thinking about it. So again, the platform is the present tense as it begins. The catalyst is sort of what happens to propel the action. Then you can do that because of that technique to kind of move the action of your story forward until finally something happens, potentially until finally something else happens that leads to that resolution. Ever since then, they lived happily ever after. The moral of the story is you don't lose your shoe, that type of thing. So however you want to sort of frame that out. Questions about the story spine before I ask you to try using it? Okay, so what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to go back into your pairs, and we're going to ask you to retell your story using the story spine. So using it as a technique to think about some of that narrative arc of your story. So Natalie put a link to the story spine into the chat. And she is also adding the story spine and the instructions for the second breakout to that breakout link. So she'll drop that in there too. And what we're going to do is we're going to put you, again, back in the same pairs. So the person you were with, or the trio that you were with last time, is, again, the person you will be with. If we have some folks who've joined us or who are able to participate at this point, we'll make an additional breakout room and we'll add them to it. But we want you to retell each other your stories using the story spine as a tool. And we're going to give you, let's say, 8 minutes or so, again, maybe a little bit more as you think and you work through the spine. Any questions about what we're asking you to do? Okay. Natalie, are the breakout rooms ready? Excellent. Okay. So the link to the story spine, make sure you click on that before you go into your room, and then go back into your room. Again, we'll give you about 8 minutes, maybe a couple minutes longer. We'll see how it goes. And try telling your stories again with the spine. We'll see you in a few. Welcome back. Everyone will be forced back in about 20 seconds. Welcome back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I am curious, who would like to share how that went? How did it feel using the spine? How did your story change? What was different? So this time, thinking about your story, how did your story change in using the spine? Emma, thank you again.
Of course, yeah. I actually completely changed my story. I told a different one.
Interesting. Why?
Yeah. I mean, I really tried to think about how I could tell my first story using this, and I was like, I mean, I could, but there almost was no like consequence. There was not really anything like super there. And the story that came to mind for me, like I felt very easily from the moment that I read this. I was like, I know how to tell this story using this. And so I was just like, yeah. And I think my second story is honestly a lot more interesting. So yeah, I just decided to completely ditch the first one and switch it up.
Okay, so the spine inspired you to tell a more interesting story.
Yes.
I
Interesting.
had a sort of
Very
similar
good.
experience, except for I didn't change my story, and it was actually
Yeah.
like as soon as I started telling my story the first time, I realized it was more of a scene and not a story. And we kind of like tried to work together because we had a group of 3 to sort of finesse mine into having the different elements. And some of it was easy, like the platform, I could set that up. But then there wasn't. I don't know. Actually, Becky ended up helping me pull out like a little thing that I had barely mentioned and like turning that into the climax and turn that into the climax. But I think I would have done better picking another story. And we noticed that Becky's story already had the elements. And so I think what the lesson that I kind of got from that was like some stories have the elements and are better stories. And some you really kind of have to stretch it. So I think it'd be fun to try to think of a different story that I might have that does have the elements.
Very nice. Very nice. And it's a little bit that difference between story and anecdote too, sort of that type of thing. Like what has a fuller kind of narrative thrust. Excellent. Other thoughts? Other folks working with the spine, how it changed. Yeah, Eli.
It changed my story to be in third person. Like I wasn't talking from, I didn't say I anymore. I said there was a guy who wanted to do this thing.
Okay.
And I think what prompted me to change it to a third person perspective was that once upon a time line.
Interesting.
That just made me think of like a storybook. And if I'm reading a once upon a time, I don't expect it to be from that first person perspective. Initially, my gut instinct is this is a story about somebody else. So it changed my storytelling to a third person perspective.
Interesting. How did that feel to be telling your story in that different way, in that different perspective?
Sure. It made me definitely feel like it was a good, like kind of a fresher interpretation of my story than the one that I told before. I got to approach the same lesson or the same thing that I took from that experience in a way that like I might view it from somebody else experiencing it, I guess, if that makes sense. Or if I were
Very interesting.
if I were to animate it or something, right? Like it gave me that kind of different thought process.
Very cool. Very interesting. And I think that's important too, because we're going to move into telling stories about our work, about our mission, about the things that we do, and sort of thinking about that threshold between things that sort of happen, within your work, and sort of then how that can be refracted out or told from different perspectives. So that sets it up really well. Anyone else? Anyone have trouble with the spine and just sort of say, I hate this and I don't ever want to see it again? Because we've definitely had that with when we've done this workshop, and that is an absolutely valid response too. Be curious, anyone else, either something good or even something that felt weird with the spine? Yeah, DM.
I just appreciated the guidance, you tell a story in 2 minutes, like, oh my God, what do I include? Where do I start? So it's kind of like a little bit of a cookbook, maybe. It's like, okay, first step, second step, and it helped organize my thinking. So I really appreciated it.
Great. Yeah, we like it. We like it too. That's why we use it as sort of the spine of this workshop, as it were, because you see what I did there, because it's approachable, it's accessible. It isn't, a tool that is this giant in depth. I need to read and think about all this kind of stuff. It's just those easy prompts to practice and use. Okay, we'll do one more round. This round's gonna be different than the other two. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again to get the prompt up there. And this time, what we're going to do is we're going to put you in trios. And we know there were some trios before. We're going to put everybody in trios. And sort of in those groups, in your trios, take turns sharing a story, an actual story. I'm going to say a word about that in a second, about your organization or the work you do. So essentially, let's bring it into our professional space, the work that we do as water organizations, to your selected audience. What I mean by selected audience, I drop it in the chat, and it's also in the instructions for this breakout, is I want you to pick an audience. So I just put it in the chat: millennial family, lawyer, farmer, community organizer, tourism council, newspaper reporter, business leader, local small business owner, teenager, or elementary school teacher. So pick an audience. So think about your story and think about a story that would be resonant to that particular audience, and then go ahead and share it. What I mean by an actual story is that sometimes when we get to this point when we're working with groups, then we send them off and they do their stories and they come back, and I invite someone to share the story that they told. And what we heard is, once upon a time, our mission is to blah, 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 blah. And they basically tell the mission and the values, and we're like, but nothing happened in that story. It wasn't a story. So an actual story resonant in some way to your work, to your chosen audience. And again, we want you to choose the audience. So in your groups, think about your audience. You can pick different audiences. You don't have to pick the same audience. An audience that's easy for you to be able to tell a story to. Tell your story. You can use the spine. You don't have to use the spine. The spine is a tool available to you, and we hope it's a tool that you take away from the session today. And share an actual story. Also in your groups, with your trios, we're going to do a little bit more time this time. I'd love to create a structure for you to offer feedback to each other. So after each person tells their story, it'd be great if the others could share a couple of strengths that they heard in the story or about the story, and then maybe a suggestion. So you can have a conversation or sort of let it flow however you like, but we offer the structure of 2 strengths and a suggestion to each of the storytellers. So again, pick an audience, tell a story about your work, your mission, what you do. Again, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, we'll keep it tight. And then afterwards, share with each other 2 strengths and a suggestion. We're going to give you about 12 minutes this time, so a little bit longer, but not much longer. Again, we want to keep this in the sort of, you're at a party, you're at a gathering, and you're talking to somebody and telling them about your work, and you have a story at hand that will be interesting, and here I go, here's my story. So we want to keep you in that mode. Any questions about what we're asking you to do? Okay. New trios. Natalie, are they set up? Great, let's open them up. See you in about 12 minutes. Welcome back, welcome back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I am looking for a volunteer who would like to share your story, your own story, not your partner's story. It can be Emma, but I would also say be like Emma and be the first to volunteer.
I'll share my story.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalie.
So I work for Colorado Trout Unlimited, and this past summer in June, we celebrated our 20-year anniversary for our conservation and fly fishing camp for teens. And we got to go and spend the week in Almont, Colorado, which is where we go each year. It's in kind of in the middle of nowhere, which is great. You don't have much cell phone service, and lots of really beautiful streams and rivers and reservoirs to fish on, and also learn about conservation. And so we had 23 campers this year come to camp, and it started on Sunday, and I arrived on Monday. And one of the first things we do early in the week is we do a drill, just to make sure, an evacuation drill, to make sure everybody's safety and everybody's good. So we did that evacuation drill. Everything was great. And then we had lunch, and we went to go do some fly fishing along 3 different areas. So we had some different teams and crews that split up on the property that we camp on. And as we're fly fishing, I kind of look over my shoulder and I see some smoke, and I'm like, what's that? Okay, it's a little dry in Colorado, but it doesn't look too bad. It's kind of just some white poofy smoke. Well, it got darker, and then it kind of came over the ridge. We could see some flames and some trees, and it was actually a wildfire. And the wildfire, the property owners did try to send out a signal. We were a little too far from base camp, so we didn't hear the alarm. And of course, when we saw the actual fire and the flames and confirmed it was something that we needed to address, we gathered the campers. We reached everybody on the radios, and between about 23 campers and about 25 different volunteers, because it's an all volunteer team except for me, I'm paid staff. We were able to evacuate camp within 30 minutes and get everybody out safe. The firefighters came in, they were able to contain the flames and contain the fire. However, we weren't able to go back to camp that night, so we had to go to the fairgrounds, and the Red Cross put us up. And I was just so incredibly proud of the team. Again, this is a volunteer team of camp counselors and camp staff. And many of them camp alumni themselves, and they kept everybody calm. There were lots of fear, lots of emotion, especially if you have ever been in dry Colorado and know the wildfires that we can have here. It's pretty scary. And then we, played games at the fairgrounds, and we were able to get back to camp the next day and enjoy the rest of our wonderful camping experience, and with fly fishing and learning about conservation. And it turned out to be really incredible. Each year when I go to camp, the campers bond incredibly. A lot of times as a teenager, you don't really know who your people are, and you maybe don't feel like you fit in. And at camp, that happens, but especially this year, not only because it was our 20th year, but because of this wildfire and this experience that we had together. They bonded and are lifelong friends. So the audience that I would do this to would be, there were a few on that list, but teenagers, to tell them about the opportunity to come to camp, millennial families, but also donors, because as a nonprofit, sharing this story and getting donations so we can continue to have this camp and or maybe grow this camp someday would be really incredible. So, and I have been sharing this story with them. So
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. What are a couple things that Natalie did well?
I feel like you set it up in a way that ended up creating suspense. I'm not quite sure how you did that, but like, it was just this very, I was kind of like, where is this going to go? And then it went somewhere. So I think that's a little bit of a vague point because I'm not quite sure how to pinpoint what you did, but it worked.
Excellent. Emma, were you gonna? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think she used the spine, whether intentionally or not, like pretty well. Like created this catalyst and consequence. And I loved the resolution of, y'all still being able to go back to camp and playing games, like at the Red Cross camp. Yeah, that was just very beautiful all around and was very engaging.
Indeed. Absolutely engaging. And I love the bringing in teenagers. I was wondering if that was your audience because you called them out a few times, and that's great because I think sometimes folks can be nervous about the teenager audience. And so it was really great to see you land that so well. Nice. I think we have time for one more. One more. Who else would like to share your story? See, I shouldn't have said one more because now everyone's like, if I just stay quiet for this, then I won't ever be called on. But there's only one more.
I can go.
Go for it.
Yeah. Sorry, if someone else wants to, and don't rely on me, y'all, as a crutch, please. I will pause briefly in case anyone wants to be brave. All right. Well, Tori will help me tell this story. So my audience is a newspaper reporter. I am the communications manager at Cahaba River Coalition, and this is a story I've actually been saying quite a bit. So Cahaba River Coalition has only really been in existence for about 2 months, but our work has happened for a very long time, decades. This organization is the newly formed merger of Cahaba River Keeper and Cahaba River Society. And the way that I like to explain the legacy work of these two organizations is with an analogy that the river is like a restaurant, and Cahaba River Society was like the front of house staff. We really wanted to provide this experience, welcome people to the river. We did like guided canoe trips. We got students on the river through field trips. We got community groups through cleanups. It was very much about having an experience with the river so that you care enough about it to care for it. Meanwhile, Cahaba River Keeper was like in the kitchen. They are very data driven, doing swim guide, collecting water samples. They have the river keeper, who essentially is like the lawyer for the river. And David, the river keeper, he was like the head chef. And they were all in the kitchen doing all of this really data-driven work. And we had similar missions. We were doing similar work in the exact same city, but we were not working together. We were honestly competing. Competing for donors, competing for attention. People were very confused about who did what. We would have people come to us and say, oh, like, we just donated to you. And they donated to the other organization, not even knowing like what the difference was. And so after a lot of work, these organizations have come together and finalized a merger. We are very new, but I'm really, really excited to see what happens now that we've combined our efforts. We, really get to redefine what this work is going to look like as a new organization for this river. We're going to have such a wider impact throughout the watershed now that we have combined these resources. And as a communicator, I think the best thing for us is like people won't necessarily have to get us confused anymore. We just need to redefine who Cahaba River Coalition now is, instead of Cahaba River Society and Cahaba River Keeper.
Very nice.
Thank you.
A couple things that really stood out. I love the analogy. I love that you take the sort of like, well, there's a merger of two advocacy organizations. Two organizations are doing these great things. You made it accessible and sort of the two sides of the pieces of work. So I think it really helped that analogy, that way of framing it. I think made it very clear for donors, clear for supporters, clear for folks. So that was fantastic. Any other strengths that folks heard?
I'm a big fan of taking things that are typically complicated or hard to understand and putting them into terms of something that is digestible that everyone can relate to. And so I really enjoyed, talking about the different organizations like the Head Chef and that they're doing this cooking of data. Because I might not know what the data organization looks like, but I know what it looks like when chefs are in a kitchen cooking and laboring away, and there's one guy calling the shots and giving instruction and everyone else is listening. So I thought that was a big strength of taking something that you might not get a lot of context for or understand at all, but put it in the terms of a kitchen. Well, most of us have been in a kitchen before, so you can understand what you're talking about in that way.
You're here.
Thanks, Eli.
We are out of time, unfortunately, but as takeaways, what I want to offer you are these tools. So the Story Spine as tool, but I think also the storytelling practice as tool. So we'll share out materials. We'll make sure that everybody has them. You have the links to the elements. But one thing I want to make people aware before I turn it back over to Deanna is that in an in-person version of this workshop, the prompts, so the prompts for the personal stories and the prompts for the audiences, we do on strips of paper that folks don't know whether, so we have people come to the front of the room, pick your prompt, and then that's what you have to talk about, or pick your prompt and that's your audience. And they share that because this session that we just did is something that you could also do with your team. So you do it with your volunteers, you can do it with your staff, you can do it at a staff meeting, you can encourage a story to begin a staff meeting, each month if you do that with your teams or your staff. So we offer these tools, a sort of basket of tools, the spine, the prompts, the sort of way we were sharing the stories and sort of asking folks about what was memorable as a tool that you can take forward in your coalitions with your advocacy, with your organizations. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen one more time and turn it over to Deanna.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for that great suggestion on bringing this back to our teams. Just to wrap us up, I'm dropping a couple of links in the chat, please, if you could give us some feedback through that evaluation form. And then we have 2 more sessions with Brandon and with Natalie coming up on December 4th. Shout It from the Rooftops, DIY marketing made fun, efficient, and cost effective. And then in the new year, we'll wrap up the series with a website session, Monster Under the Bed. So please take a look, open up that link. You can register for both of those. And just want to say huge thanks to Brandon and to Natalie. Today's session, I hope that you all got as much out of it as I did, and I'm looking forward to the next 2. Next slide, just have to plug River Rally is coming up. We do have a We have a survey open right now and are looking for input on the kind of sessions you want to see at River Rally. If you've never been to River Rally, please take a look at that website. It's coming up next year in the spring in San Antonio, Texas. It's a great opportunity to learn from each other and from folks like Brandon on topics that can be useful to your work. So without anything further, just deep thank you, Brandon and Natalie. Appreciate your work. And I appreciate everybody taking time today and just being so interactive and participating so fully in today's session. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, here, here. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good evening.